afternoon. There's a big effort by organised business and the tourism sector to convince the British government to take us off what they call their red list. At the moment, the British government says that people coming to South Africa have to spend time in quarantine before going back into British society because of COVID-19. That's despite the fact, as you might have noticed, we have relatively few new cases of the disease. Mavuso, the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, David Frost, runs the Southern African Tourism Services Association. Good afternoon to you both. Busi, if I may start with you, what are you asking the British government to do here?
Stephen, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation. So, Stephen, in a nutshell, what we're saying is that the continued ban by the UK government is simply illogical. So the UK, as you know, along with most other countries, 6 other countries actually reacted to South Africa's detection of the Beta variant in December 2020 by imposing an outright travel ban. So South Africa is no longer a country with a variant of concern, which is the Beta variant, and this has actually been confirmed by the National Institute for Communicable Diseases. So the UK clearly hasn't updated their science because they keep on harping on the fact that, we still have the Beta variant, which is no longer the case. So they are clearly making a decision and are keeping South Africa on the red list on facts that are incorrect, because they are also alleging that all these new variants are coming from South Africa, which is also factually incorrect. It particularly doesn't make sense as well, Stephen, because South Africa's average number of daily new infections has halved over the past 2 weeks, which is what has led, to the lightening of the lockdown restrictions which came into effect this past Monday. But also when you look at the stats, you will see that South Africa's infection rate is less than a quarter of the UK's. It's also lower than most EU countries, which are currently on the amber list of the UK, which is France, Greece, Portugal, Belgium, and the Netherlands, and the UK at the moment is really increasingly becoming an outlier in this regard, because of the 6 countries that had initially imposed the travel ban on South Africa, UK and Australia still remain the 2 which haven't lifted the ban yet. So you have had countries like Germany, which are actually saying that South Africa is no longer a threat, and they no longer have the variant of concern. So we are therefore asking the UK government, what then therefore is the issue of keeping South Africa on the red list? Well, all the evidence and all the facts are pointing that we are managing our variant quite well, actually.
But see, do you think that Britain, is there a reason for the irrationality? Is this useful to a politician or something? Or do they just not understand science?
I think they are just ignoring the facts that they actually have in front of them. I'd like to think that you've got a lot of smart people in the UK government that actually understand the facts. So I think that is what we are calling for. The noises that we're making, the efforts by government, the work that has been done by David Frost is really to actually try and appeal, to that logic. And I think, as David would tell you, we actually have a lot of sympathetic ears, in the UK political sphere, who are actually, looking at what can be done to actually remove South Africa from a UK perspective. But it also doesn't make sense, Stephen, because we are a key trading partner for the UK. We trade natural resources and beneficial exports, among other things. They are also a very important financial market as we raise significant capital on London's financial markets. So we are actually listing all these things and are actually putting them, in front of them to actually put together a strong business case around why South Africa should actually, be removed from the red list, because the current situation is a lose-lose situation, looking at the fact that the African continent in its totality is also very strategic for the UK government as well.
David, how important is the British tourism market for our tourism industry?
Stephen, it's our single biggest market. So pre-COVID, we got just shy of 450,000 arrivals from the UK, and it's as I say, it's our largest market. But there's beyond tourism, there's also just a massive South African diaspora that's set up in the UK, and equally a lot of UK residents live in South Africa. All those family ties of births and deaths and weddings. That's all been sort of put on hold. But it is the inbound industry is we've had domestic open since July last year, and it has actually been useful for our industry to have domestic travel. We haven't had any super spreading or major incidents we have strict protocols in place, but we do need our international inbound industry to come back. Collectively, the inbound industry is worth 120 billion rand a year to South Africa. So, yeah, it's a very important one.
You talk about the diaspora. The other thing about British tourists is because some of them have family here, because some of them originally came from here, they don't just come for a week or two. Some of them say, for the whole summer. Some of them say for 3 or 4 months a year. They spend a lot of money.
No, absolutely. The swallow market is key, for the Western Cape and other parts of the coast. But one of the arguments we've put forward is around the impact on conservation. It's our main USP. I mean, the sort of key reason that people come to South Africa is to see our wild, and that's been built up over a century and more. And, the damage that's being done in areas where we are not able to get incomes generated, not only to the wildlife base, but also to livelihoods in those rural areas has been devastating. So, we as Busi quite eloquently put out, I mean, the appeal really is for the UK government to look at the science, to look at, what's going on. We have, discovery's been amazing. I must say, Stephen, it's been, there's been a real South African response to this. So the Discovery actuarial team swung in behind us. Their estimates are that between 70 and 80% of South Africans have actually had COVID. And if you overlay that with what's happening at the moment with our vaccine rollout program, I mean, there is absolutely less risk of a British person actually coming out and getting COVID in Cape Town than there is of getting COVID in Cornwall. So, we quite frankly don't understand the continued sort of aberrance in this sort of way. But it's a dogged fight. You've just got to keep on putting the facts on the table and sharing them with the appropriate politicians. And I think the other thing, just to add, to answer a question that you put to Busi earlier, is the decision-making in the UK has changed markedly over this COVID period. It's now centred in about 5 or 6 key politicians around the UK Prime Minister. So the letter from Business South Africa directly to the UK Prime Minister is from our point of view seminal. And then also the support that we've had from Minister Naledi Pandor in her interactions with both Dominic Raab and Grant Shapps in the last 10 days is also been incredibly useful to this campaign.
It's interesting, Busi, I mean, to listen to David. He suggests that people are more at risk of contracting the virus in Cornwall than they are in Cape Town. I notice he didn't mention the risk of getting stuck in a traffic jam in Cape Town in December. I did want to ask, Busi, I mean, we had the announcement from the President on Sunday night about moving to lockdown level 2. We know in 2 weeks this is all going to be reassessed. I'm going to grab the opportunity to ask you, as Business Leadership South Africa, do you think there's scope for level 1 in 2 weeks, perhaps?
I'm hoping that we are actually going to see a lot of more restrictions that are actually going to be lifted in the next 2 weeks. I think the key one is that is happening in the alcohol industry, because I think that is critical to actually open as huge or as many aspects of the economy as possible, because I guess when you look at our stats, Stephen, we need all the assistance we can get. We need to put all interventions in place that would actually make our economic trajectory turn the corner. You saw the GDP numbers that were released last week for quarter 2. We're sitting at 1.2% growth. It's not nearly enough, to deal with the unemployment, that was reported of 44.5%, I guess, in terms of the expanded definition. So I think looking at the stats, that the very same case that we're making to the UK government, I'm hoping that the South African government will actually also consider, the stats that are actually in front of us to ensure that they open up more sectors of the economy and more parts of the economy so that we can actually accelerate our economic recovery efforts.
And I mean, there's obviously a lot of relief that we need as well, David. I mean, we want the tourism industry to fire. I mean, we're hoping perhaps there'll be a domestic boom in tourism if enough people are vaccinated. The December period, instead of 3 or 4 weeks, could maybe twice that, perhaps, pent-up demand. Is government doing enough to support tourism, David?
Look, Stephen, my answer would probably always be not. There's never enough that you can do to support your tourism industry. It's the second biggest sector of the economy. There has been I think, a very sensible recovery plan put in place by the ministry. The SA Tourism and Tourism Business Council are embarking on a massive global advocacy program to try and reignite confidence in South Africa as a destination, to relook at the brand, and to look at repositioning ourselves in a COVID world. I mean, to our mind, we've never been a mass tourism destination, Stephen, and I think that serves us well. Although you talk about traffic jams in Cape Town, we only got 2.6 million overseas arrivals. Thailand gets 32 million, Turkey gets 56 million, Spain and France 80 million each. So that sort of pre-COVID model of mass tourism, I think, is yesterday's game. And South Africa, and just the way that we do tourism, which is generally outdoors in beautiful spaces and in wide open spaces, I think we are particularly well positioned to attract the new COVID tourist. And it may not be. We may not be as heavily reliant on the retired, part of the market. Intrepid millennials, I think are the future. We have an amazing offering around adventure tourism. New Zealand put themselves on the map in adventure tourism with 5 activities. We've got over 100 different types of adventure tourism that we can position South Africa as. So rather than doing sort of 10 days and 8 days game farm, Cape Town, and 2 days on a bungee, come with 8 days of adrenaline and then chill out at a game reserve for 2 days after that. So I think there are exciting ways in which we can position ourselves in the new sort of world that we find ourselves in, and we will be working with our government partners to try and extract as much value as we can from that.
David Frost from the Southern African Tourism Services Association, Busi, Mavuso, CEO of Business Leadership South Africa. Thank you both. Really do appreciate the time on Newsfeed this afternoon. Well.